am not able to be there in Garching. Obviously, the train strike has meant that I'm stuck in Pasadena in the US, where it's almost 1 o'clock. So bear with me. So I'm going to be talking about BABAMUL, which is probably the least known broker of the ones you're hearing about this morning. But it has its origins actually about 15 years ago when I gave an invited talk at ADAS on what I thought Astronomy 2020 would be. And this was when Roy Williams, who's also in the room and will be talking in a few minutes, and I were working on Sky Alert and VO Event and the Catalina Sky Survey. And LSST was going to be happening in 2014 and would be producing 100 gigabytes of data a night. And we were wondering what the hell we were going to do to manage this. But we had this vision that in 2020, we would wake up in the morning to, the universe today, which would be summarizing the changes in positions, flux spectra, and the observations of billions of objects that have been observed within the last 24 hours. And we also expected that all our data exploration, visualization, analysis would occur in virtual spaces. We'd have intelligent agent systems mediating between us and the data, and we'd be doing this both through textual, verbal, and gestural haptic interfaces, communication, that sort of thing. So we were sort of there. We're probably 5 or 10 years out. Certainly, we were at least 10 years out on what LSST would be. But fortunately, in the meantime, ZTF came along, and I'm the project scientist for ZTF, for those who don't know. And I thanks to Jakob for giving a brief intro. ZTF is really the survey which has laid the groundwork for a lot of the stuff that we're thinking about, and is essentially a 10% LSST in terms of data volume, data rates, and that sort of thing. And it's 5 petabytes over the last 5 years. We've done more than 1 million exposures to date. That's over a year of open shutter time. The total sky area that's been covered by ZTF is now about twice that Rubin will do in its 10-year survey. We've got billions of data points, and we've got over 700 million alerts. So there's a lot of stuff that we've been able to build on and build from. In particular, there's a lot of science that's come from that, ranging from, solar system stuff right out to GRBs, FRBs, all sorts of things and the cosmological distances. But one thing that's particularly of interest is that we've now done 1,500 supernova 1A classifications back to back. So ZTF observes, they're detected, they are automatically scheduled for robotic follow-up with the 60-inch and the SDDM machine. Those spectra are then taken, those are identified, and they're reported to TNS. So there's a whole integrated system there where there's no humans in the loop now. And this is really, I think, what we've always been thinking about and hoping for, that we will have these intelligent brokering systems, data managed systems, which will do this for us. So what have we not learned from 700 million alerts? I think that's quite important. Instead of what have we learned, why aren't we where we thought we would be even 5 years ago? We don't really yet know how much information we will require to identify classes of astronomical object by their temporal behavior. All of my colleagues are showing their brokers, and they're showing confusion matrices about the classifiers and whatever. The really good ones may be getting 99%, but if we've got 40 million alerts coming a night, we need 99.999%. How do we get to that? Transformers are still not going to get us there. We don't know how much information we require. We don't know if we're reporting the right sort of information. As both Gautam and Francisco have shown, we have different ideas of how we should be connecting the information or organizing it or presenting it. Market forces will probably dictate how that actually works in the Rubin era, with all the other things that will be go on in as well, but we still don't have a good idea. We don't really know how to optimize follow-up for specific global strategies, what's the best action to take and when, and we still have humans in the loop when we shouldn't. And I'm telling you that in 5 years' time, you will wake up and your smartphone will explain to you what it discovered last night. That's where we are in terms of AI and large language models and foundation models, that we're really not thinking about yet in the brokering model, because we're still thinking about balanced random forest and very old technologies. So the other thing is most alerts actually have zero value. A conservative estimate is that the science results that I showed that ZTF has generated is the result of about 500,000 alerts, which means that if we've done 700 million so far, less than 1 in 1,000 is interesting. And that's really what the brokers have to be figuring out, is which one of the 40 million are aligned. So there's going to be about 40,000 interesting alerts that you're really going to be focusing on. And that's the scale at which most of the brokering systems are going to be working at for the data management, for the information management, not the 40 million. What you want are really efficient systems to throw out that 99.9% and leave you with that 0.1%. So the idea behind BABAMUL was always to try and focus on essentially a data management system or an information management system built around what ZTF has done. So this is a real live system, and it's battle proven, coupled with low latency, high throughput inferencing, which essentially could be run anywhere, to allow you to do that initial first triage to get down to the things that are interesting, and then couple that with optimized follow-up and maybe some sort of classification. The idea as well is that it's supposed to be lightweight, scalable, customizable, decentralized, all those sort of things. Very different from I need a supercomputer or I need a large cluster in my basement. I really want something that can be run off a Raspberry Pi, if at all possible. So that's what we pitched back in 2019 to Rubin, and they bought our sales pitch. And what we've been largely focusing on for a large chunk of this is Fritz, which is essentially our data management system within ZTF. And this does all the sort of things that you've seen from Francisco and from Jakob and from Gautam already, that their respective brokering systems do. You can scan through alerts, you can visualize the available information, you can request past future data, you can run analysis tools on these, API connections, you can schedule observations on other telescopes, you can get the data back, you can set all this sort of stuff up. It's open source software, and it's based on Sky Portal and Kowalski, which are the two infrastructures in the back end, which are also open source. If you don't have an account, just go to the website and play around with the stuff that's publicly available. And we've demonstrated in-house that it'll be able to scale to just, to the 10 times current data rates that we've got from ZTF. So there's no issue in our mind that this would be a viable system as your data management system if you're looking for one that is, battle hardened. The more interesting thing is, okay, what happens how do we take humans out of the loop effectively? And this is one of the things we're looking at is reinforcement learning, which is a step up from the active learning that Gautam was mentioning with Antares. Most of you probably are familiar, have heard of reinforcement learning in the context of AlphaGo or things like that. And the idea here is that you actually have you ultimately end up with a global strategy that you're trying to optimize towards, and you're changing your policies, but you're doing so when you have a constrained set of resources available to you. And this is essentially the machine learning way of doing that. So Niharika Sravan, who was my postdoc and is now assistant professor at Drexel, came up with this toy Kilonova follow-up agent to demonstrate feasibility of this type of approach. And it's a very simple model, and you can read the details in her paper. But essentially, what we were doing is we had 9 transient, one of which was a kilonova, and we were simulating just a 7-day follow-up period where you could either take an observation or do nothing. And we were trying to see if we if we put that against humans who were supposed to be experts in doing this, and they figured out which one of those they wanted to follow up with successive observations or not, how well could they do versus us? So we went for the most simple reinforcement learning system. The first important result out of this is that we actually do better than random. That means that this is a learnable problem and that there is an optimal solution out there to this problem. We don't do as good as all humans. We do better than humans in certain circumstances. But ours was the most basic system. Now, there are far more complicated reinforcement learning systems that we're now working on to try and get to a system that actually outperforms the humans. And once we can do that, we can take the humans out of the loop entirely and just have something which is fully optimized to figure out what is the best set of observations I should take to discriminate between kilonova models given a possible LIGO detection and such. So the other thing we've been looking at is this fast inferencing. And again, we use as our base model the real bogus system that Dmitry Duev developed for ZTF, which has been so successful. And this was really just an off-the-shelf VGG6 CNN, which achieved much better than random forest. And we've been playing around with deploying this on FPGAs to see if we can get better performance. It turns out that we can reduce the model to a much more simplified form using only 6,000 parameters instead of the 350,000 that the original Braille model did with the same accuracy, quantization. And we've been playing around with, over the last couple of years, a number of different hardware accelerators. And what we find is that even with just a plug-in USB Edge TPU that you can put onto, a Raspberry Pi, we can get fast inferencing at least at the rate of LSST, and with the FPGA and with dev boards, we can outstrip what Ruben will be providing us with. So again, it looks like the fast inferencing is pretty much a solved problem at this point with very low cost off-the-shelf hardware accelerator components. One of the other things we've been looking at is possibly, can we even improve on that with quantum machine learning? Again, this is real results. We have demonstrated quantum advantage now using 2 qubit systems that are out there in the wild through IBM quantum computing. And we find that with a particular variational quantum circuit, we can actually get quantum advantage, so we can use a smaller data set, fewer training epochs, less training time to get better accuracy than our real bogus system that we developed initially for ZTF. So in summary, ZTF has about a year to go to the end of LIGO 04. But looking forward to what Ruben is going to be providing, our current data information management systems are perfectly capable, and I think you're going to see a lot of demonstration of that with the other talks today. Low latency, high throughput inferencing is achievable, again, both classically and on quantum systems for a variety of reasons. I do have questions about whether we are using the right information. Our alert packets are probably too large, and I would argue that for the first tier, we probably can use something which is much smaller. Certainly the models seem to be pushing that way as well. And maybe there are things about multimodal foundation models for the types of alerts that we're doing that we should be thinking about as we wait for the alert streams to come on in the next 2 years from Ruben. My guess is that we will actually have optimized automated response systems much more in place by the time that the Ruben alerts are there. And so there is a question for, I think, for ESO facilities and other sorts of facilities for follow-up about when would you be happy to be triggered by an automated system rather than a human with no human in the loop. And I think that by 2030, we will have the intelligent astro assistant who will be doing stuff for you overnight whilst you're sleeping, and you'll wake up and you'll just be trying to figure out what it is you've actually detected, or do you agree with what the AI is telling you it thinks it's found. So thank you very much.
Okay, thanks very much. Any questions?